will give you the snapshot of the future. PTS is a symptom and a subset of a traumatic brain injury. What we have found out by the new tests is that it is not a mind problem. It is a brain problem. And here's a little scoop, and I'm trying to be brief.
Take all the time you want. I was only kidding.
The blast injury as it hits, and it's the same thing with mortar in Vietnam and the same thing with the shells in World War II, it affects the area of laying down new memory most, because that particular part of the brain is more vulnerable. The area for old memory is a little bit more protected. So what we are finding is this, and it makes sense in evolution. The last thing that happened that saved your life, you better remember. You better remember how your life, so that reverberating pathway of playing back that horrific event is what is actually set up in the brain as a new brain pathway, whereas the new information is not laid down. Hence, setting up the PTS, which is why now we're calling it post-traumatic stress, not post-traumatic stress disorder. The people who don't have that are the people who did not survive that particular attack. So with cognitive retraining, which is what I'm talking about, getting somebody to a computer and saying, soldier, here is your job. For the next 2 hours, you need to be at this computer doing this reading, doing this mathematics, is to lay down new collateral pathways for laying down new memory. So you will find, and Gary and I were just lucky enough to be invited down to Cincinnati just 2 weeks ago and met with General Corelli briefly. And General Peter Corelli is former Vice Chief of Staff for the Iraq and Afghanistan, where he's the #1 speaker for traumatic brain injury, is now CEO of One Mind for Research, the Robert Kennedy Foundation, whose job is to map out the brain in the next 10 years. And both Gary and I mentioned to him, I said, we consider PTS as a type of brain injury. He goes, oh, we do too. So the new research is going to show the actual area where the destruction has occurred. And that is going to be a paradigm shift. The other thing I wanted to point out is the medications. One of the reasons why we're seeing this high suicide rate is the medications that we normally use to treat a mental disorder, which, I believe everything is chemically related, chemical receptors, but actually leads to suicide in individuals with a traumatic brain injury. So if you have a TBI, you have a 7 times greater chance of committing suicide in your lifetime. And if you add drugs with a black box warning saying, don't give this to an adolescent, because they may be prone to suicide, and yet we are giving it to them in the hundreds, that also leads to that. So we definitely need to have a little paradigm shift here. And what John didn't mention is he and I originally met in the ER. I approached this problem as an ER physician, not as a rehab physician. Rehab will take time and work with you. ER this is a problem right now. Every 36 hours, one of our young men or women in the military commits suicide from these wars. Every 36 hours. We've been doing this for 10 years, It was very interesting. The last day that I left the VA, one of the less enlightened people as I was leaving said, Dr. Gordon, nobody understands why you have this sense of urgency. Next war, we'll know what we're doing. And I kind of stopped. And I said, this war is, at that time, had been going on for 5 years. I go, are you going to tell that to the father, to the mother, to the spouse, to the child? I said, if this were you or a member of your family, would the next war be soon enough?